The deep sea is a place that humans know very little about. For most of our history, we didn't even know that there were animals down there. And even now, despite incredible advances in technology, we still don't know much about the ocean floor. We've mapped more of the surface of Mars than the bottom of the ocean. And it's a good thing we don't know much about the bottom of the ocean, because if we did, we might not go in it anymore. That's because the ocean floor is home to some truly terrifying things, like underwater volcanoes. They might seem like a cool thing to see from a distance, but get too close, and you're likely to be met with a horrifying death. Underwater volcanoes are far more common than those on land. In fact, there are over 1,200 of them in the world's oceans. But they're thankfully pretty easy to spot, so you're not likely to sail straight into one by accident. You probably won't be able to tell it's an underwater volcano until you're already on top of it, at which point it will erupt and kill you. There are different types of underwater volcanoes, so how exactly do you spot them? The first type is a seamount, and this is the easiest to spot. Seamounts look like normal mountains, except they're under the water. They can be thousands of feet high, but because they're underwater, they're usually worn down by the elements and their tops are flat. While it might be nice to swim around the base of a seamount, getting to the top could be disastrous. As with any mountain, the higher you go, the colder it gets. And if it's cold enough, there may be ice on top of the mountain. And if there's ice on top of the mountain, there's a good chance there's also snow. And if there's snow on top of the mountain, it means that it's covered in ice, meaning that you'll probably freeze to death before you ever reach the summit. Even if somehow you manage to survive, the next part of the journey would almost certainly kill you, because as you near the peak, you'd find the air becoming thinner and thinner, which would mean that you couldn't breathe. Eventually, you'd simply suffocate on the last stretch of your journey. But there's another type of underwater volcano that's much more dangerous. It's called a Guyot, and it looks like a seamount, except it doesn't have a peak. That's because a Guyot was once a seamount, but it got worn down by the ocean. That is, until recently, a Guyot is an underwater volcano that has recently erupted. This means that the surface is smooth and shiny and it's very hot, which means that if you wanted to climb a Guyot, you'd have to deal with all the problems that come with climbing a mountain, like falling off and freezing to death, while also having to deal with being burned alive. But it doesn't matter if you manage to avoid all those things, because the moment you reach the top, you're going to be met with something even worse: scalding hot lava. Unlike when a volcano erupts on land, where the lava has time to cool down before it reaches its victims, when a Guyot erupts, the lava hits the water immediately. This means that the lava is still boiling hot when it makes contact with the water, and you'd have no way of escaping it. If you fell into the lava, it would burn your entire body in just a few seconds. And what makes guyots especially dangerous is that you never know when they're going to erupt. That's because guyots can stay dormant for centuries, then erupt suddenly without warning. Once the eruption starts, though, you'll have plenty of warning to escape, provided you can escape quickly enough. When a Guyot erupts, it creates a massive explosion that can be heard miles away. But after that explosion comes a tsunami, and you want to get out of there before that arrives. A tsunami created by a Guyot can easily be over 100 feet tall. And even if somehow you manage to outrun it, the water would be boiling hot and full of volcanic debris. Even if you somehow managed to get away from the initial blast, you'd have to worry about the steam. When lava hits the water, it doesn't just produce an explosion and a tsunami, it also produces an insane amount of steam. This steam is superheated and incredibly dangerous, and anyone who runs through it would be met with third-degree burns. If you thought that underwater volcanoes couldn't possibly get any worse, wait until you hear about the third type of underwater volcano. It's called a trench volcano. Trench volcanoes are the deadliest type of underwater volcano, and they're responsible for some of the most devastating disasters in human history. Trench volcanoes are found near places called deep ocean trenches. These are areas where two tectonic plates meet and one slides under the other. The area where they meet is called the subduction zone. When the two plates meet, the one on the bottom melts and turns into magma. This magma is less dense than the surrounding rock, so it rises to the top. As it rises, it forms a mountain. Then, when the mountain gets too heavy, it falls back down to the ocean floor and creates a trench. That's how a trench volcano is formed, and it's also why they're so deadly. When a trench volcano erupts, it sends a massive amount of ash and gas into the water. This can create a tsunami that's big enough to wipe out coastal cities. It can also cause a huge amount of global warming. That's because the gas that comes out of these volcanoes contains carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, so it traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere. When a trench volcano erupts, it releases so much carbon dioxide that it can cause the planet's average temperature to rise by several degrees. This can lead to rising sea levels and more extreme weather events. To make matters even worse, trench volcanoes are extremely hard to predict. The magma that forms them comes from deep within the Earth's mantle. This magma is under such high pressure that it doesn't flow like normal magma. Instead, it just sits there until it's ready to explode, and when it does explode, it's with such force that it can break the ocean's surface and create new islands. In 1980, a trench volcano in Indonesia erupted. It sent a massive amount of ash and gas into the air, blocking out the sun and causing temperatures around the world to rise. The eruption also caused a tsunami that killed hundreds of people. And here's the worst part. Scientists had no idea that the volcano was going to erupt. They hadn't been able to study it because it was too deep in the ocean. It's amazing to think that these underwater volcanoes exist, but it's a good thing that they're so rare. If they were more common, it might be a good idea to stay away from the ocean. But thankfully, we don't need to worry too much about underwater volcanoes. They might be dangerous, but they're also fascinating to watch. Just keep your distance and you should be fine. Now watch. People found huge underwater cave. Then this happened. Or check out this video instead.